Hello friends, welcome back to part 24 of my Tesla earnings forecast video review series. I'm joined as always by my co-host, Loki the Chihuahua, who is tucked in under his blue blankie in his dog bed, a mere couple of feet away from me over here. And I'm going to share my desktop and hop to the top of the page. So we made it all the way to the bottom of the detailed model tab, but we started at row 1169, so that's halfway down the page. So what we want to do now is figure out where that income statement came from. You know, the last several videos here, we've been looking over the summary numbers. Where did those numbers come from? How did I forecast how much those revenues and costs would be? Well, it's a multi-stage process, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through stage one of that process, which is forecasting production and deliveries. So I'm just going to grab this guy here, drag it to the top of the page. Up, up, up we go. Oh, that didn't work at all. There we go. Up, up, up the page. To the top. All the way to the top. Let's start with stage one. I've called stage one production and deliveries by site and model. I should probably just call it stage one. Production and deliveries by site and model. There we go. That'll be like that from now on. So where do we start? Let's start with the vehicle Tesla has been producing for the longest at the factory they've had for the longest. The Fremont factory, not counting Roadster because they stopped making Roadster, so it doesn't belong in a forecast. So how do you make a forecast? How do you decide how many vehicles Tesla ought to produce and ought to sell or deliver to buyers during a quarter? Well, the approach that I have taken to it is to answer a few questions and then do math. So the first of those questions is, hey, how many vehicles can be made at this location for this model? So Fremont Model S, how many Model S's could Fremont make per week? I think the answer is about 1,000 is the most they could make out of Fremont for Model S these days. So that's my starting assumption. The next question is, all right, during how many of the weeks this quarter was this factory producing that model? So at Fremont, I think the answer to that question is 13 weeks of production. You do 13 weeks times 4 quarters, that gets you to 52 weeks per year. So no holidays, no downtime, no disruption since Tesla completed the Model S Plaid upgrades. Gives me an assumption that there will be 13 production weeks in Q1 of 2023 as there normally are. Then for production efficiency, is Tesla going to be making more or less of the capacity, the design capacity that's possible in Q1 of 2023? I think it'll be a little less, but close to what it was in Q4. So I've got 78% here, and then I've got more production efficiency in future quarters with a little bit of seasonality playing into this. So these are my production efficiency percentage forecasts. Where do these come from? They come from my following the news of Tesla very closely and going with assumptions that look about right to me. And if that sounds wrong to you, welcome to the world of analysis. In analysis, you have to pick assumptions at some point. Like, you can do a lot of research and you can do studies and you can take analytically based approaches towards determining assumptions, but ultimately you're going to have to pick input assumptions that make sense to you, that look reasonable. And I have taken you into my forecast model all the way down to that level now. So you can see I'm expecting about 10,000 Model S's produced, which is close to what they've been producing. each quarter for the past year. So this doesn't feel too low to me. It doesn't feel wrong. So the next row is asking the question, hey, how many Model S's were there already in inventory, finished goods inventory, waiting to be sold? Model S's available to be sold. And I think, based on last quarter's ending inventory of 3,000, that there's 3,000 Model S's globally available to be sold. Now, this number has been increasing as time goes by, and I'm forecasting it to continue to increase into the future. Why is that? Because Tesla is ending the wave of deliveries globally. So in the past, Tesla tried to keep these ending finished goods inventory numbers as low as possible by trying to deliver all of the finished goods they had before the end of the fiscal quarter. But that was hard for the delivery teams to accomplish, and inefficient because there was no inventory to be delivered early in every quarter. So there would be this feverish pace of deliveries at the end of quarters and then nothing to do at the start of the following quarter, right? That's not a good way to do business. It's not great for your service teams trying to make those deliveries scheduled and happen. It's not good for your costs either to try to expedite those deliveries. Sometimes you end up having to pay for expedited shipping or transportation costs to make those deliveries happen by the end of every quarter. And it's not sustainable. The more vehicles you produce globally, the harder it becomes to try to deliver all of them. So for all those reasons and more, Tesla has decided to end the wave. And what's that do? It increases your ending finished goods inventory count. Does this mean there's no demand and Tesla is doomed because it's past the demand cliff? No, it doesn't mean that. It just means the ending inventory count is going to get closer to the average inventory count than it has been in the past. All right, so how do you know how many deliveries there are? Well, it's just math after you've done these steps already. So if I know how many I produced, and if I know how many I had to begin the quarter, well, then that tells me how many vehicles there were available to be sold. In this case, you can't read that number perhaps, but it says 13,140 is the sum of these two. You can probably do that math in your head because 3,000 is such a round number. You add these two together, it's 13,140. Then you probably can't do the math in your head, but you don't have to because it's right here. If you had this many available, and then at the end of the quarter there were still this many unsold, then this number has to be the difference. So you take this number plus that number minus this number, and it gives you deliveries of 9,954, similar to the number of Model S's I think Tesla has been delivering over the past 3 quarters in my detailed model. Now, I should probably repeat that Tesla doesn't publish delivery detail by model. They do report Model S and Model X, but they report them combined together. So we know that the sum of these two is how many vehicles were delivered that quarter. The sum of these two numbers is how many Model S and X vehicles were produced during that quarter. But we don't know what the mix was between the two models. I have just spread them here based on what I think the distribution was. All right, so that gets you to the deliveries number, and then there's deliveries subject to lease accounting. How do you figure out what this was? Well, I'm just taking the deliveries and I'm multiplying it by a guess of 14%, which is based on prior quarters when, 17, 12, 0.1, 0.09. 14 doesn't seem way off. It seems like a pretty moderate assumption to make. Not too low and not too high is what I have forecast for Model S and X. I've got them both assuming that it'll be 14% of deliveries to leased buyers in Q1. And it's the same logic for every model at every site that I just went through. So I'm not going to spend as much time on the rest of these as I did illustrating how this works. So for Model X, assuming the same 1,000 vehicles production capacity per week at 13 weeks of production, 76% production efficiency, a little less than it was last quarter. This production efficiency, I think, had to ramp up from very low levels after the Model X Plaid refresh was completed, and Tesla had to retool the factory for that. So probably they weren't producing very many at the start of last year, and they've been ramping up since on the Plaid line. So pretty flat across the year for production and deliveries. You know, for Model S and for Model X, about 10,000 per quarter. Doesn't seem wrong. So about 80,000 produced and delivered for the year is my expectation for S and X. Next comes the Fremont Model 3, same format. 8,500 is what I have in here for production capacity. You may ask why these numbers are so low. Tesla is using some of the Model 3 capacity to produce Model Y from Fremont, and that's why this number is lower. If Tesla wanted, they could make 8,500 Model 3s per week, but they would need to produce less Model Ys to do it, and I don't think they want to do that. So that explains why these numbers are very low compared to every other model Tesla makes in my forecast. So I've got it at 63%, or 59,000 vehicles produced over only 11 weeks. There was some downtime for the Fremont Model 3 reported out, so I've got that assumption working in my calculations. With ending inventory rising as time goes by to higher levels. Maybe Tesla will do a little better in Q2 than they do in Q1 with ending inventory. That's what I've got in my forecast. Very low number of leased vehicles, Model 3s out of Fremont anyway. I've got 3.3% of deliveries forecast to be leased. Then for Model Y, I think the production capacity has increased a little as of Q1 2023. We did hear that Fremont had a record week at Investor Day, so that would make sense. Here's an 86% production efficiency expectation, or 62,000 Model Ys produced by Fremont in Q1, with higher ending inventory up to 6,600-ish about, making for deliveries of Model Y out of Fremont at 57,720, with a bunch of these vehicles in transit at the end of the year is my expectation. And again, 3.3% of those deliveries becoming leased. Fremont Roadster, it's all zeros. Tesla is not making that vehicle yet. One day they will, and that's in my forecast, but no sense looking at that right now. That's a long way off. Gigafactory 3 Shanghai, jumping the Pacific. Here's the maximum weekly production capacity for Model 3s. I've got it at 9,000, but only over 9 weeks of production. So there was a Chinese New Year shutdown, and there was a line upgrade shutdown for Shanghai. So they're probably only going to be at 80% production efficiency is what I'm forecasting, and then that'll get a little better in the future quarters. And with more production weeks, we should see more production in Q3 particularly than we do in Q1. Tesla never gets 13 weeks of production out of that factory due to state-mandated holidays. There's penalties if you remain open during official national holidays in China, except for, a few positions that you might pay a fine on for running, preventive maintenance or something while the lines are shut down. So Tesla has to manage through that and only gets 13 weeks of production during Q3s. This also explains why on that first chart in my production, Tesla earnings thread, there's a little tick down at the end of every fiscal year. It's because Shanghai, Model 3s, and Model Ys, you can't produce as many in Q4 as you can in Q3 with 1 week of shutdown for national holidays. All right. So there you go. Yeah, beginning finished goods inventory a little less than the ending finished goods inventory for Model 3. A much higher ending finished goods inventory for Model Y than they began the quarter with is my expectation here. So that's how you get to these lower vehicle delivery numbers from Fremont than we saw last quarter. So there should be a little sequential decline owing to, as you can see, fewer production weeks. Then I've got a space here for a small robotaxi. I may have to rename this Cybercar or something. Leave me a comment in the description, or in the leave me a comment to this video telling me what you think I should name the small robotaxi. That's what Tesla called it at Battery Day. Maybe they'll call it a Cybercar. I don't know. That's the one I'm considering changing it to. All right, so from Asia we move to Europe, and what are we making in Berlin? Well, we're not making any Model 3s yet at the Grünheide location, which is really more Brandenburg than it is Berlin, but who's counting? It's close enough to Berlin for a company headquartered in the U.S. to just call it Giga Berlin and call it good. All right, so Berlin Model Y, max weekly production capacity. This has been increasing. I've got it increasing by 1,000 per quarter as they tool up and relieve bottlenecks in the production process. They ought to be able to get to the same 8,500 production that Fremont has from that factory. And that would give them, you know, close to 100,000 vehicles produced. Then in future years it'll pass 100,000 in 2024, 2025. I've got it coming right up to 125,000, but not quite. I've got it at 95% of capacity. If you make 10,000 per week times 50 weeks, that would be 500,000 per year. I think that is the design intent for Berlin Model Ys. Okay, back to where we were, 2022 and 2023. What's my expectation for Q1? I think it's going to keep getting better. So production efficiency up to 62% on capacity of 6,000 vehicles per quarter, making production of 48,000 vehicles with an ending inventory a little higher, 4,600-ish, making deliveries of about 46,000 out of Berlin. That's all they make in Berlin so far. Then 2 Giga Texas. How about their Model Ys? Same kind of story we just saw at Berlin. Should be improving the capacity every quarter as time marches on. And Texas doesn't shut down for holidays. They keep running. So 13 weeks of production is my expectation at a 66% production efficiency. Making 51,000 Model Ys out of Texas in Q1 with higher ending inventories than we began the quarter, leading to deliveries lower than production, maybe 48,000 from Texas for Model Y, and then higher numbers in every future quarter as the ramp continues. What about Cybertruck? I am probably going to have to move to shift this out further into the future. I'm less and less confident that there will be any, even 70 Cybertrucks produced in Q2. That may happen in Q3. It may happen in Q4. I don't know. I'm probably going to push this in my next forecast. But here's what was working in the earnings forecast that I tweeted out. 70 vehicles produced, 1 in ending inventory, leaving 69 Cybertrucks delivered in Q2. That's what I forecast, with 420 with a 9 in it for the vehicles produced. Now I'm just amusing myself trying to find 420s and 69s. There's a 420. Ending finished goods inventory. Okay. So there's my joke of a forecast for Cybertruck. I really don't have any confidence in how many Tesla's going to produce and deliver, but I'm probably not going to be way off from a Tesla materiality perspective, expecting less than 15,000 Cybertrucks this year. That seems like a safe bet at this point. Then for Semi, those have been getting delivered. So Tesla delivered 34 in Q4. I've got them delivering more than that in Q1, and then continued growth from there. Why are these numbers so much smaller than these numbers? Well, you need a ton of cells per Semi. They've got the equivalent of, 4 or 5 battery packs worth of batteries in them to give them that 500-mile range fully loaded. So also they're being produced out of a small facility in Nevada right now that may not be able to do any better than this, 20, 40, 80 is my quarterly production capacity. And then these production efficiency percentages I have ramping up. Now maybe at some point before the end of this year they will move Semi production somewhere else. That could reduce the production to 0 while they do that. It could increase it further from there. In future years, I do have it continuing to ramp, but not to very big numbers. So I think Tesla said they expect to produce a total of 2 million of these vehicles. So I'll continue to play this one cautiously. And that's it for the detail. After this, it's just summaries. So the first summary is, well, let's combine everything together and see how much that is. So 440,000 produced and 420,000-ish delivered. Somewhere in that range is what I expect for Q1. Those numbers will get reported on April the 2nd, the day after April Fool's Day. Tesla Investor Relations will post this to the website about noon, and then we'll know what these numbers actually are. And there's the total leased. Here's the days sales and ending inventory. So this is just a metric of saying, all right, what was your ending inventory? And if you figure out how many vehicles you sold per day on average using an industry standard assumption that there are 75 days per quarter, which is super weird, but you have to do it that way if you want your numbers to tie to what Tesla reports for days sales and ending inventory. Then how many days worth of sales is your ending inventory? So 96,000 vehicles, is that a lot? Is that a little? How do I get comfortable with that? Well, Tesla can sell through it in 17 days, is what this metric says. If you have 75 selling days per quarter, I don't know why there's 15 fewer days or 16 fewer days than there are calendar days in a quarter, but I will leave that question to anyone who knows to reply in the comments and explain it to me. Then there's the inventory build or drawdown. This has been a positive number every quarter for 3 quarters, and I'm expecting it to retain that status going forward, growing inventories every quarter, ending every quarter with more inventory than that quarter began. The last time there was a drawdown, it was small, with ending inventory in Q1 of 2022 being a little less than it was the previous quarter. All right, and percent leased just tells you, okay, the leased deliveries divided by the total deliveries, what percentage of your deliveries are leased. Then below that, it's just giving you the totals by factory. I'm not going to talk you through that, but I will let you pause here if you want to check out what I'm expecting from Fremont, from Shanghai, from Berlin, and from Texas. And that's the end of stage 1, so that's the end of this video. And we'll check in with Loki. He has not moved. And I'll say, if you enjoyed today's video, click the like button. If you're not subscribed to my channel already, why not go ahead and subscribe to my channel over here. Click the notification bell to get alerted whenever I post fresh content. Thank you to everyone who supports me through Patreon or by joining my YouTube channel, especially Kathy Kitchler and Halter Ferguson Financial, my executive producers, and I'll see you in the next one.